From the European Parliament here in Brussels, this is Raw Politics. Thank you for joining us tonight, and this is what we have on the program for you. New year, old problems. From France to Belgium to Germany, why Europe is starting 2019 with an anger hangover. Far right rising, we look ahead to EU elections and what could be a historic win for populists. Brexit countdown, preps for no deal kick into high gear as British MPs await a critical vote. Here comes Romania. Will political infighting overshadow as the country take over the bloc presidency? And your call. It's time to have your say, Europe. Our new interactive show wants to hear from you. Thank you for joining us on our first show for 2019. Happy New Year to you. Now it's time to meet our panelists. Ryan Heath is joining us. He's a political editor at Politico Europe. Ryan, good to see you. Which of these stories are you watching really closely?
Honestly, I'm going for your call because what Europe lacks is more of the dialogue between people in Brussels and citizens. So any platform, any program, any MEP who can encourage that gets my vote.
Indeed, we talk to politicians here, then we talk to the people. That's how it should be. All right, and also joining us tonight is Roberta Metsola. She's a Maltese MEP with the European People's Party. Roberta, which of these stories are you watching?
Well, besides your call, I received a direct invitation here. It would have to be the rise of the far right in different countries and how that could affect what this parliament will look like after May.
Very soon, in fact, just a few months from now, the elections. All right, and also joining us is Gerolf Annemans. He's a Belgian MEP from Vlaams Belang, sitting with the Europe of Nations and Freedom Group in Parliament. Gerolf, which of these stories are you watching closely?
Well, I'll go for the angry hangover.
Yeah.
New Year, old problems.
Indeed, New Year, old problems. That's exactly where we are going to start today. It may be a new year, but anger in Europe continues. In Germany today, security personnel at Berlin's two main airports walked off the job, demanding higher wages. And in Belgium, here, trade unions block roads into the country, demanding better treatment for transport workers. And in France, the Yellow Vest movement that took a pause over the holidays picked up again. Protesters drove a forklift into a government ministry compound over the weekend. They torched cars on the Champs-Élysées and in one skirmish beat riot police to the ground. Well, demonstrations against a proposed diesel tax began in November, but have since morphed into an assault on Emmanuel Macron's presidency. All right, we're looking at a new year, but same old problems as we were talking about. Do you see a common thread in everything we're seeing in these different countries? Ryan, I'll start with you.
Well, I think there's definitely a thread where people are saying they want to criticize establishment forces of power, whether that is political parties, whether it's imperial presidents, whether it is the people who they think are taking what is rightfully theirs. So yes, there's a thread there, whether it is Hungary and the fact that you've got a big concentration of power in the government, whether it is this fuel tax in France, you can see it in many different places, and it is people saying they're not comfortable with where the establishment has led them.
So they're not comfortable. I mean, the issues that we see in the different countries are triggers for what has existed there. And would it be fair to say that the discontent has started years ago when Europe started going through the hardship? Is that a fair assessment to make?
Yes, I would say that. There is a growing sense of frustration with the politics as usual. I think citizens are telling their governments that what you've been doing for decades and ignoring the problems of so many people on the ground can no longer continue. But of course, there's a difference between different member states. What you saw in Germany perhaps was more structured than what is happening in France, which is spontaneous and directly attacking the ruler of the country who was so overwhelmingly elected a couple of years ago. So there is this sense of, if I go out on the street, I can bring some governments to their knees. And I think that is emboldening more than when they started 10 years ago, if you can continue call the economic crisis as the start of this, is bigger now.
And you were saying ignore. I mean, I might know where you stand on this, but do you think there is a sense of governments ignoring what people are saying?
Well, it's my opinion that what we see now is an old problem in the sense that governments and the regimes, and especially the European Union, ignored several signals for almost a decade. Referendums against larger European Union, more deepening of the European Union. Also, the electoral system in France is very special. It brought people to the power that were ignored by the people afterwards. So there is an injustice in the system, whereas people have to pay their taxes, they have to pay their fines, they have to come up with a tremendous amount of regulation, and that is a conflict. And in the meantime, the regimes don't listen to the people. And so we will see more of these things.
When you said bringing governments down on their knees, I mean, what would people gain from this? I mean, wouldn't it hurt them as much as it hurts the government?
Well, sometimes people aren't thinking very rationally or very long term. If they feel that they can punish someone they feel has done wrong to them, many people will take that opportunity, or they are inspired by one particular example or another, like the Brexit referendum or Donald Trump's election. It's not hard to join the dots between that and some of these protest movements. You see that standing up achieves some success or gets you a headline in one country, and you feel maybe I can do it in my own country. It's an election year here in Europe. So in many senses, people would be mad if they didn't try and take a shot at politicians, because this is the one time when politicians around the continent are all listening to them.
Yeah, and what's interesting is they're going against different types of governments. You have people in Hungary going against a government like Orban's, and people in France going against Macron, for example. So there has to be a common thread, as you were saying. It's the feelings of people against their governments.
Yes, and perhaps I could pick on something that Ryan said before, that when you have very strong governments, it is sometimes so easy to fall into the trap of thinking that that majority gives you the power to do whatever you want. And at some point, populations snap. Now, whether that means that people go out on the street or they overturn long-standing democratic systems, or simply they realize that if a prime minister is surrounded by a few corrupt individuals, they have to be the target while they are actually going around their life, paying their fines, being lawfully abiding citizens, law-abiding citizens.
So let's talk about another aspect of this. When there's so much anger on the street, who takes advantage? Who can benefit? Who can? Some would say the populist groups would take advantage of this.
We are just a part of that phenomenon. We voiced certain problems that were, by the way, ignored afterwards. But what we see now is a more general society that comes up for real change, change of what governments up till now did, because most of governments in European Union do the same thing every time again with another person or another president or another government, but fundamentally do the same thing. And people want real change, especially on migration, but also on other issues. There must come a political, I would call it modesty in front of what people want with this change. And we are a signal. We are populists. We are the black beast. But actually, we were just democratically voicing certain problems that have been ignored afterwards.
Yeah, you are on the right, and I mean there are groups on the left as well that can be classified as populist. But the shift that we've seen in Europe, and we have been watching them closely. It really has moved from the center to the fringes, to the sides, as you would say. And it's even more significant now because of the elections, the European elections coming up. And if you look at the polling numbers, there are polls that show that anti-establishment parties may actually end up wielding a lot more power than they do now. So let's have a look at these latest numbers from Politico, in fact. Now, out of the 705 seats at the European Parliament, representatives from Eurosceptic and anti-EU parties may end up winning around 155 of them. And this includes groups on both the right and the left, as we were saying earlier. What is really interesting there is that the parties that don't like the European Union might end up actually being, having more power, as we're saying. Ryan, can you break down these numbers for us? This is a Politico poll.
Yeah, so that is the low end of the predictions. It could be up to 200. Now, the problem, if you're a Eurosceptic, is that you have trouble uniting with other Eurosceptic parties into a single alliance. If they could all join together, they could challenge Roberta's party, the European People's Party, to be the biggest force in the parliament. But they're part of a broader fragmentation across all of the political spectrum. So it looks likely that no party will win more than 25% of the votes, and you'll see these seats spread out everywhere. So even the second biggest party won't get more than 20%. The Socialists are on 19%. And what you're seeing is deep pockets of support for these different fringe groups. So the Greens are doing great in Germany, but they're nowhere in most of Europe's countries.
Yes, so could we say it's a far right rising? Is that a fair
They are
thing
rising.
to say?
So the group that has risen the most is the Europe of Nation and Freedoms, the ENF. They're up to 60 seats, and that's largely due to Italy's Lega. Like, they're the group that has really come forward, and because they're in a big country, that's why you see this big impact in the polls there.
Yeah, you were talking about challenging Roberta's party. So are you worried? You're from a so-called establishment party. You are the establishment party, so the EPP. Are you worried?
Well, in Malta, so my country, there is, let's say, little risk that an anti-establishment member gets elected. Why? Because we have parties that are like umbrellas, that you can bring together all sorts of different ranges.
But as a general trend for Europe.
But within the group, I mean, I worry because making deals across the political spectrum will become so much more difficult. And they are not only political deals, but proper legislation that would send the message that we can make laws here which matter to people. And if we don't manage to do that, then we will come again next election and have, like we are facing now with the migration legislation, have a bunch of laws that we could not get a majority for. And that would mean a failure, not for the establishment. I hate to call this myself as being part of the establishment. I consider myself to be someone pragmatic that can negotiate with everybody. But at the same time, you need to find people to negotiate. And if you have a growing number of members who come in simply to make sure that nothing happens, because there are a lot of colleagues in here who do that, and every time there is any project or any possibility of money being allocated for Erasmus, increasing
Would you accept that?
Well, not entirely. There is a part of it that is right, but our problem as the ones who put the things into question is totally different from establishment parties or groups that have to run the European Union, whereas we have a message, an idea, the idea of less European Union, do less. I'm not saying no European cooperation. I'm pragmatic also, but I'm telling this European Union cannot go on like this. And these establishment parties, for the moment, say we will go on, we will go further and we will go deeper. And that if you want to turn that around, which is our position, that's not easy as easy as it looks.
There's a point you raised that the establishment parties have to run the European Union. Well, you have the freedom to just basically keep challenging and challenging without going through the day-to-day.
Let me not only correct, but add to that we are challenging the system. And the system wants to go on in the same way, changing nothing. And we have the yellow vests. And we have the yellow vests and our parties and our victories to challenge the system, and it's not as easy as go on with it because they are in power. And
is it a real challenge, because you're just kind of pointing out, poking holes?
The UN Migration Pact, for example, destroyed in the space of a few weeks because of a very successful argument from parties like your own saying it had to stop. You see it whether it's on everything on left-leaning issues like climate change through to more right-leaning issues like migration or Italy's different approach to vaccines. You know, there's a very broad selection of policies now where, because of anti-establishment resurgence, there is a policy impact, even if those people are not in power, but they are in power in Poland, Hungary, Italy. So you're seeing a very broad impact.
So it's more, is it more of like stirring the pot, but not actually proposing solutions, and therefore, as you say, it's more fragmented, and in the end we end up doing nothing?
Well, and you know, the easiest thing for me would be to go to an election in May and give one-liners of the biggest challenge is migration, or we have a massive security threat, or something that would just get me quick votes. This is not what I got into politics for. And sometimes, yes, you have to take responsible decisions for what you're going to do. And it's so much easier to just stand up and say, yeah, I'm going to block everything, because that's something that will make more sense. But on the other hand, when you mentioned like we want to challenge the system, well, we have very active, I can assure you, discussions within the European People's Party, where we look at where, yes, a lot of money has been spent trying to flog dead legislation or trying to revive things that will never go through. That is a healthy discussion, but at the same time, we need to move on certain areas. Which
very quickly, I'll let.
Whether in May we have to decide: will this European Union go further in the federal integration of power, or will she slow down, reconsider certain powers, and do as the people ask: less migration, less integration, and European cooperation on a not federal basis. And that's our offer.
Okay, let's leave it at that for now, because a lot more talk on the European elections coming up, especially with, challengers, as you were saying, gaining a lot of ground, as Ryan was pointing out. All right, let's move to the United States now, because the ramifications of the historic midterm elections are now being felt and celebrated. Let's take a look. A new Congress has opened its doors. The Democrats are now in control, but that's not what makes this Congress special. The 116th House of Representatives is the most female and the most racially diverse in history, including for the first time an indigenous and 2 Muslim congresswomen. They're led by Nancy Pelosi, who becomes the first woman in history to take on the role of Speaker.
I'm particularly proud to be the woman Speaker of the House of this Congress, which marks the 100th year of women having the right to vote.
With America leading the way, could we see similar scenes in Brussels after the European Parliament election this spring? When you look at that picture with all those women, Roberta, you are a minority in this parliament. I mean,
yes.
When is
Malta,
Europe going
we are
to
an
get
even bigger minority. There are so
Right.
few women who are active in politics. I just wish that this parliament could boast of an image that, as represented by Nancy Pelosi and all the diverse women who come from all over the country that fought their way through and are going to bring in their way of doing politics, because that's what the voters wanted from them, and that is really historic. And we should be trying to emulate that here.
Is it a fair assessment to say that sometimes Europeans look at America and think, well, Europe is actually more progressive, and then we see something like this? I mean, is that a fair assessment to say?
Well, in number terms, Europe is already doing better than the US. But Nancy Pelosi is a master tactician. Alexandria Ocasio-Cortez, I would love to see someone with that level of charisma and impact in the European Parliament. It would make my job as a journalist a lot easier. And Europeans would understand more about their union if you had figures like that here in greater number.
Yeah, would the populist parties challenge this lack of diversity, lack of women in politics?
Of course, when we did that in the many elections of the last 10, 15 years, we were the examples. Our French delegation, for instance, led by Marine Le Pen, who wanted to become the president of France.
And now a 23-year-old today.
Yeah.
Yes,
Jordan
Marine Le
Bardella
Pen,
tops the national rally list.
So we are younger people and what you call diverse, especially women. We're in favor of it, and we will try to. And I call the voters upon electing populist, as you would say, populist women, because they are all over the place.
Yeah, so this is something that Europe still needs to address. All right, well, coming up on Raw Politics, a lot more uncharted territory. UK Prime Minister Theresa May warns of a no-deal Brexit as she stares down a critical vote. Plus, what's next for the man who negotiated that deal on behalf of the EU? That is coming up. Welcome back to Raw Politics. Now, I have a question. Why would the UK government deliberately create a traffic jam? Well, with the answer to that brain teaser and all the latest Brexit news, here's your Brexit brief. New year, same message from Theresa May. The UK Prime Minister has taken to the airwaves in a bid to convince MPs to back her Brexit agreement.
If the deal is not voted on as this vote that's coming up, then actually we're going to be in uncharted territory.
Also concerned about a no deal, more than 200 MPs from across the political divide who have signed a letter urging Theresa May to rule out leaving the EU without an agreement. And we've not got long to wait until Theresa May's deal goes before Parliament. Expect high drama in the Commons next Tuesday, the 15th of January. If Theresa May fails and the UK leaves the EU without a deal, it's thought that customs checks could lead to severe congestion around the port of Dover. That's why emergency plans to beat the Brexit backlog were put to the test today. Early this morning, around 80 heavy goods vehicles set off from a disused airport turned lorry park and headed for Dover. Will these scenes be repeated in a few months' time? Only time will tell. Well, joining me in the studio to unpick the latest on Brexit, we have Kathleen Van Bremt, a Belgian MEP from the SPA party and vice chair of the Socialists and Democrats group. We also have Stephen Wolfe, an independent MEP from the UK, and of course, our political editor, Darren McCaffrey. All right, we've all gone on holiday, gone on that break. Stephen, has anything changed in Brexit talks and coming back here?
Well, I think for Theresa May, she still believes that Santa Claus is out there because she wants to give a lot more to the European Union after we've left. I think it's going to be gift after gift after gift. And the reality is she hasn't changed. She's kept her vision that she wants to have this withdrawal agreement. For those of us who campaign to Brexit, have links into the groups who are fighting for what we regarded the original Brexit, which is a WTO deal. They're still firmly in that camp. The DUP are still firmly against her view. So you've got this massive impasse that was there before Christmas, and it's going to continue now. And so she has got a really hard job to try and convince anyone that her deal actually matters. And as you said there's 200 MPs who will now vote against going to a WTO deal. So, Sylvie, pre-Christmas, post-Christmas, exactly the same.
So where does that leave us?
Yeah, nothing has changed. Welcome to Britain in 2019, where they have literally organised a traffic jam to test a no-deal Brexit, expecting 150 lorries to turn up. I think only 80 did. The government has managed to sign a £14 million contract with a ferry company, again, to try and cope with no deal, a ferry company that actually owns no ferries. And Theresa May insists that things are changing, or she hopes things will change, in the sense that she is continuing to negotiate with the European Union to try and extract more ahead of this crucial vote next week. But fundamentally, things have not changed. Stephen's right in the sense that, there is still a large number of Brexiteers MPs who are not going to vote for this deal, along with the DUP, along with the opposition parties, which means that at the moment, unless she's going to pull a rabbit out of the hat, she's going to lose that vote. There are suggestions that we could see movement from this side.
Yeah, I was going to ask that.
Next week.
What do you think about that, Kathleen? When she comes here and tries to get more concessions from Europe, from the EU, do you think that's anything in that side has changed?
I don't think either. I don't think post-Christmas, after Christmas, things has changed a lot also on that side. I think coming from the other side of the EU, and if I would be British, which I'm not, I would be a Remainer, to be very honest on that. But coming from the other side, I think you should be open. If we can help to make a better deal, so that in Britain the MPs can vote for a deal, we need to do that. But I don't see how we can do that without making the EU more vulnerable. And in that sense, for me, it's really very odd. I've always been a big admirer of the UK. No, I'm not laughing with it, but with a lot. I'm looking with such an astonishment to what is happening right now, especially from a political point of view. I think all MPs, opposition, governing party, they should regain a little bit of senses. Either they go for this deal, or either they go for another referendum. But I don't see any other solution coming up.
Isn't that the point, Stephen, that you campaigned for Brexit? Mm-hmm. You wouldn't want to have seen 2.5 years later, essentially, no decisions made on a whole swathe of issues from citizens' rights through to aviation. No decisions being made on that yet. Second of all, the cabinet, the UK cabinet, have in recent weeks been discussing what to do about food shortages. Mm-hmm. That's not the sunny, optimistic Brexit that you guys offered, is it?
Certainly, it's not the sunny, optimistic Brexit I campaigned for, and the main reason for that is because they didn't put Brexiteers in charge of running the kind of negotiations afterwards. They left it because Theresa May is a Remainer. The whole of the cabinet were Remainer.
Issue, I think.
And what we should have done very clearly from the start is said our position is that of a WTO deal, which is what most of us really wanted in the first instance. We go for that fairly quickly, and if you do that situation, then we can go for a proper negotiation of a trade deal based on an FTA scenario. And don't forget, the FTA wasn't dismissed by Tusk. It was actually accepted as a principle, the Canada deal by Barnier. The only reason we're in this mess is because we have essentially a Remainer-led government with Remainer advisors and a Remainer civil service who do not have that.
Okay, let's give her very quickly.
I've seen Boris Johnson's no longer in the government, but he was a Brexiteer.
Yes, three against many.
Yeah, but I think in political life, you have a moment where you can have a referendum or elections or whatever, and then people campaign. And after that, you need to take the vote seriously, but then get your senses back. What is the best for Britain and for Europe? You don't care about Europe, but I care about
I do.
Britain and Europe.
That's a little unfair. We do obviously seriously.
Okay, but I care about both of them, is to make a good deal. And this is the starting point of a deal. And let's move from there. And otherwise, asking to the Brits, why not go for another referendum?
Okay.
And of course, Theresa May would say, Steve, that, her deal is reflective of the entire country. The vote was 52-48 at the end of the day.
Yeah, but of course we never do that in any other election, do we?
Before that, let's go to London first, because, Theresa May faces another setback to her Brexit deal ahead of next week's Parliament vote. We know that. Now, but for more, let's go to our correspondent, Vincent McAvenny, joining us live in London. Vinny, so tell us what happened today.
Good evening, Tessa. Well, MPs returned after their Christmas break, and there isn't much sign that the festive cheer has convinced any of them that they should back the Prime Minister. It seems everyone here at Westminster is still in the trenches where they were before Christmas on their positions next week. We're going to have 5 days of debate and then the vote on the 15th. And earlier on today, I spoke to Sam Gyimah, who was a member of Theresa May's government up until his resignation in December, and he was giving a speech nearby here, and I asked him afterwards about that resignation and the government's no-deal plans.
Well, the principal reason for making the speech is that this week the Prime Minister's deal is going to be debated again in Parliament with a vote in a week's time. And I wanted to set out why I will be voting against that deal. Essentially, her deal is one in which we surrender our veto, our voice and our vote in the EU in return for best endeavours. Given none of the big decisions have been made, it means the UK will be in a situation where we're negotiating where 27 other countries can veto anything we want. I think that sets us up for failure. Now, given that sets us up for failure and that there is no majority for any option in Parliament, Parliament is deadlocked. I think that it may be the case that the way out of deadlock is to have a new referendum with a new set of questions to find out how we can chart a course for our future.
How confident are you in the government's capability when it comes to no deal, and how bad do you think things would get for people watching this?
Well, for 45 years, we have been entwined with the EU, not just in terms of trade, in terms of scientific research, in terms of medicines, in terms of companies that rely on supply chains. Unstitching that in 2 years is just not feasible. The government can plan for no deal, which it is. It is the responsible thing to do, given that the default option in the withdrawal agreement is that we leave without a deal. But it is deeply undesirable as an outcome. The very idea that we are having drills at our ports when we are not under threat from an external foreign enemy should tell you how bad this could get.
Now, Sam Gyimah's responsibilities when he was a minister included the Galileo satellite project that the UK has been building with the EU, and he said it was that experience trying to untangle Britain from the project and what he thought we would lose that convinced him that he needed to give up his career. He says he hates being an ex-minister. He was quite a high flyer, but he thinks now it would be a dereliction of duty if MPs didn't try to alter course. And some 200 MPs across all the parties, across Leave and Remain, have written to the Prime Minister today saying that they will not allow her to go to the no-deal position. There's another group of MPs looking to put down an amendment on some finance legislation which would lead possibly to a US-style shutdown of government. So an incredibly difficult situation here once again for Theresa May as she starts the new year, just 11 weeks away from that Brexit day.
All right, thank you for that. Our correspondent Vincent McAvenny there in London. Stephen, you were reacting as we were listening to what was being said. Okay, idea of a referendum. What is your take?
It would destroy democracy in Britain. Absolutely kill it over there. You only have to listen to what people are saying is, I will not vote again. some would say, I will vote for Jeremy Corbyn just to punish the Remainer Tories so that we can get out the Tory MPs who voted for them, because they know that the only thing that Corbyn could do is raise taxes for the rich. And they'll say most people who voted for Remain were the rich in the UK. There's a class divide, there's a social divide, there's an old-young divide, and this would continue that. And what I see, what is utterly disgraceful, is 200 MPs who all voted for Remain in the first place under this kind of silly idea that they believe it's undemocratic not to have another referendum. Actually, what they're doing is saying, you're too thick, you're too stupid, you're too idiotic. To those 17.4 million people who voted to leave, we know best, and that is an arrogance that will destroy our democracy.
But there is also an element here where those MPs are saying that they do not want a no-deal scenario. They're arguing that's not what the British people voted for, because, and this is true of the referendum, people may have voted on a principle to leave the European Union, but didn't actually know what the details of that were. I mean, I think Stephen's got a point, which is definitely, this was the largest exercise of democracy that Britain had ever seen. Referendums are not like they are in many other European countries. This was only the third ever national referendum. People who had never, ever considered voting for did, and they would feel a sense of betrayal. But the whole point is we know a lot more about what Brexit looks like 2.5 years later than we did back in June 2016. And MPs are saying that they do not think that people actually voted for a no-deal Brexit.
Well, I think, again, they're slightly incorrect in that, because we clearly heard in the debates both the Chancellor and the Prime Minister say that we're outside of the customs union, that we're outside of the single market, that there could be a WTO scenario if this goes through. That is part of Project Fear One. Project Fear One made it very clear that there would be a WTO deal, and we've even shown the videos of Nick Clegg saying exactly the same thing. So I debated many, many times people saying that, and I campaigned for that. People understood leaving the European Union meant leaving the institutions, the laws, and the market.
All right. Well, having heard all these arguments, we know that negotiating this, 2 years of negotiations, is no easy task. Now, his time as the EU's top Brexit negotiator might be nearing its end. But for Michel Barnier, who had that difficult task, Europe's challenges are only just beginning. Now, fresh from a winter break and keen to show everyone he's not just the EU's Brexit man, he launched the bloc's first call to action of the new year. Let's take a look. After more than 2 years of difficult and often painstaking negotiations, Michel Barnier's side of the Brexit deal is largely complete. With the ball in the UK's court, he's free to get back to more pressing issues, Europe's future. In what seemed like an impassioned plea in Project Syndicate, the EU heavyweight set out his vision for 2019, citing climate change, geopolitical tensions, and the rise of China. He urged Europeans to come together and seize the moment. Now more than ever, we Europeans need collective action in defense of our values. This could be Europe's moment. Among his priorities were a green Europe, an economy that serves everyone, and a response to the challenges of migration. Only then, he said, will people truly believe that Europe is the future, not just wishful thinking. It almost feels like he's positioning himself for a campaign. But what I'd like to ask is if there is...
It couldn't be more blatant. It couldn't be more blatant.
What I want to know is, if there is a crash out, how much responsibility should Michel Barnier be bearing on this?
Oh, that's a difficult question. I think the guy, he's an intelligent guy with a lot of diplomatic skills. He did the best, I think. But you cannot blame him. It's the fact that we haven't foreseen this could happen. We haven't foreseen the Brexit. We don't have any methodology, skills, whatever, to do this in a vast way as we are supposed to do this right now. But having said that, I think Michel Barnier is much more of a politician of the past. I do not hope that he will be the next Commission President or things like that. Let's have some new people. Maybe let's have some women in charge. Maybe we will have a better.
Listening to what he's, I mean, it seems like he is up to something.
Yes, he's up to something. That's why I'm telling that. That's why I'm saying
ever present.
He's definitely on the maneuvers.
He is maneuvering there. All right. After the break on Raw Politics, Romania steps up. The country takes the reins of the bloc presidency for the next 6 months, but already a political spat is threatening to overshadow all that. Well, that's coming up. Welcome back to Raw Politics. And German investigators are following up on various leads after a massive hack attack targeted politicians and celebrities last week. But many questions remain unanswered. Alex Morgan and our team in theCUBE have the latest on the story. Alex?
Well, Tessa, I reckon when you're thinking about data hack and we're talking social media, your mind probably skips to Facebook. That's probably fair given the history there, but this time we're talking about Twitter. And this is big. We're talking one of the largest data privacy scandals in the history of Germany, centering on this Twitter account. This one here, it's now suspended. But when it was active, it shared the personal information of roughly 1,000 German politicians and public figures on Twitter. Effectively, whoever was behind this stole that information and then used this account to share it out. Now that already, as you can see, a huge implication given the nature of the people it was going after, many of whom were prominent politicians. Now, the German police confirming yesterday that they did interview a witness. They did a search of a property in the southern city of Heilbronn, but the witness himself, actually, quite interestingly, came forward and tweeted, identifying himself as a 19-year-old IT worker. Now, he was very clear to say, look, I was being interviewed as a witness, not the suspect. But he was being questioned given seeming links between himself or knowledge he had of whoever might be operating that other account. Now, what kind of information was shared here? Well, we know at the moment very little from the officials, very little official information. But all of this is called doxing. It's where you take personal information about people and you share it out, normally on the internet for malicious intent. In fact, on the internet for malicious intent. And let me just take you through some of those affected. They include the German Green leader, who actually said after a sleepless night in this tweet, I quit. I'm quitting Twitter. I'm quitting social media, he says. He was angry. His family information was shared. That was stolen and shared. You can see, in fact, you can imagine how disturbing this is when that kind of information is shared. And that is what a doxing attack is. That's what we're talking about here. Now, obviously, big political implications there, but it wasn't just politicians. Let me bring you up this user here. 1 million Twitter followers, 3 million subscribers. A huge YouTube star was one of those caught up and had his information stolen, thanking his followers for supporting him and being there with him. But many, many questions, as you said, remain unanswered. We know the police are now doing a national coordinated search, but so many questions about how this happened, what exactly was stolen, why, and who that mystery user was. Well, Tessa, we wait for more information. Apparently, that will come midweek. So we wait and we watch.
All right, thank you for that, Alex, and our team in theCUBE keeping an eye on that story. Okay, so it is a new year, and that means there is a new country at the helm of the European Council, and it is Romania. The country marked the occasion with a lights show in the capital, but just beneath the surface, some simmering political tensions. Rocked by accusations of corruption, controversial judiciary reforms, and political infighting, the spotlight comes at a difficult time at home and in Europe. Well, Romania will have to steer the union through the last stages of Brexit and finalize some key pieces of European legislation. And joining me now to discuss the ins and outs of the Romanian presidency is Siegfried Muresan, a Romanian MEP with the EPP Group, Maria Udrescu, a Brussels-based Romanian journalist who works for Le Livre Belgique, and still with us, our Euronews political editor, Darren McCaffrey. Right, Maria, I'll start with you. I mean, Jean-Claude Juncker, he expressed doubts on whether Romania can actually, in his words, grasp what it means to lead other EU countries. Is he right?
Well, it depends on how do you look at this, actually. There was all this debate about the preparedness of Romania to lead the European Union. Actually, well, from a technical point of view, I guess the country is as prepared as other countries could be. But the problem is on a political level. We, in Romania, the politicians only care about going or not going to prison. And this is a very direct, intense and personal motivation. They couldn't care less if Brussels criticizes Romania. So, okay, of course, this obsession has been...
But that's worrying for Brussels if you're saying that politicians just care about whether or not they go to prison in Romania. Well, there's work to be done here, no?
Of course, it's worrying because Romania, as you can see, has been drifting towards the Orban club, the Hungary and Poland. Yeah. They've adopted a very Eurosceptic populist rhetoric, and it's been very endangering from Romania's image on a European scene.
Siegfried, do you agree? Is this a fair assessment of Romania's capabilities?
Look, without any doubt, the people of Romania are ready for the first Romanian presidency of the European Union. We have seen the people of Romania for the past 2 years go to the streets to defend European values, to defend the rule of law, to defend a strong, independent judiciary. And they have done this with the flags of the European Union in their hands.
Well, so it's the people
are ready.
The government.
Well, the government,
I mean, they're the ones who would be
They will have to prove over the next 6 months that they are complying with European values, that they are up to the job, because what does the presidency of the European Union mean? It means that for 6 months, you have to manage all of the European Union. You have to make decisions which are good, not only for your country, but for the whole 28 member states. And this is to be seen whether the ministers succeed. I hope they will, because these 6 months, when Europe is looking at Romania, Europe is looking more intensively at Romania than at any moment in time since the fall of communism.
I mean, it sounds like a massive task, but and it is a difficult time for Europe. But at the end of the day, I mean, Brexit is already nearing its end, and you have other pieces of legislation which is already in the works.
And it's going to be a shorter term because we've got the European elections in May as well.
Though
we have got the first first EU summit like Britain due to be held, I think, in Romania just before those elections.
Does it make it easier for Romania?
I think it does and it doesn't. I think it's, you're right, on a technical level, Romania seems to be in place, but when you've got the president, I think the resigned Europe minister suggesting the country's not ready for this, and you've got speculation here that actually maybe they should skip Romania out and go direct to Finland, who's due to take over. That's quite serious stuff to level at a country. I think what is interesting is what you picked up on is just how there is something like 6 billion euros, Tessa, of money that has been signed off from Brussels, European primarily money that should be spent on roads, on infrastructure projects, on railways, that is not being spent. Because, as you say, politicians seem more concerned about whether they're going to be locked up or not. And again, I think there is this continued fear that this East-West divide is getting
so
worse.
What kind of message does that send, actually? Siegfried, you wanted to react to what Darren was saying.
I just wanted to say that when it comes to Romania's capacity to absorb EU funds, there are many good mayors and local county council presidents who absorb EU funds. The problem is the central government, and one has to distinguish between
But the problem is there is still corruption on a massive scale in the country, and
combating corruption has been functioning better and better in Romania, and all of the international reports, the yearly report of the European Commission says that the prosecutors are doing well, the courts are doing well, the anti-corruption directorate is doing well. The problem is
media freedom, what about press freedom as well, and stifling of that? I mean, the concerns that Brussels has leveled against Romania.
Yes.
And what kind of message does it send when it is leading the EU?
Yes. With regards to the media, of course, there is connections between business, politics and media, which, for our European standards, for yours and mine, are not right. But when it comes to combating corruption, as I said, institutions are functioning, and because they are functioning, the politicians are so upset, and they're trying to reduce the competences of these institutions.
All right, very quickly, Maria, do you think that the focus on what's wrong with Romania is too much, where he's pointing out what's actually being done right?
I think it's a bad timing for Europe and for Romania. This presidency comes up at a time where, as you said, Europe is in transition. Romania cannot do much in terms of accomplishment. Even if it was France or Germany taking up over the presidency now, it couldn't come up with huge projects at this time. So all Romania can do is try to solve the problems that are still on the table. I'm thinking migration, but good luck with that. At the same time, it's also bad timing for Romania, because we are at the time where the Social Democrats are more desperate than ever. They are led by Liviu Dragnea, and let's remember that he is the key figure and the key leader of Romania, even if he's not prime minister.
And the solution just must be, I think, for many people, is actually Europe. The European Union remains quite popular in Romania. Many of those protesters, anti-corruption protesters, are holding up EU flags, looking to Brussels to provide them with the support to try and solve
as Sigrid was saying
Romania's
out,
problems.
separating the Romanian people from the Romanian government. All right, well, we will be watching Romania for the next 6 months, indeed, as they head the European Union. All right, after the break on Raw Politics, what Donald Trump really thinks of Europe. Plus, it's almost time to have your say, your call. Our new interactive show is coming up in a few minutes. We'll tell you all about it after the break. Welcome back to Raw Politics. Now, you've heard from us today about the growing discontent across Europe, and now we want to hear from you. Directly following this program, we're live with your call, and we'll be taking calls live from you, the viewers, to hear about the issues that directly affect you at home. So do tell us about them. The lines are now open for viewers in Western and Central Europe. You can phone in at +32 2283 0283. You can see it on your screen. You can also email us at rawpaul@euronews.com. You do let us know what you think and use the hashtag #RawPolitics on Twitter and on Facebook. And you can also Skype with us, connect with us under the username #RawPolitics, all of that in one word. All right, joining us again on the couch is Darren McCaffrey, our political editor at Euronews. Ryan Heath, he's back from Politico.eu's political editor, and British MEP Stephen Wolfe. All right, I'll start with you, Ryan, because you were talking about this earlier, that you want to talk to people. So what is your expectation?
Well, I'm going to throw it back into their court
just people
as well.
People in general?
Well, yeah, I'm a very lonely guy. It's a new year. I want to get it started on a good note. But I want to know, what would it take to convince the people calling in that their politicians are really listening to them? You know, that the system has woken up to their frustrations. So, yes, I'm happy to hear a rant, but I want to know, when will you know that politicians have listened to you? Because they need a bit of a guide to know how far they have to go to get people out to the polls or to win their support.
It's always what's missing, right? The connect between the people and the politician. And politician, what would you expect from this, or would you like when talking with people?
I want the people to call in and say why they think their governments and the EU are failing, which is why they're feeling discontent. Why are they wearing...
So you do want to rant?
Well, I do want that.
Or what they're getting right.
But I want them to specifically say what we, the politicians, are doing wrong. Now, I would argue that a lot of politicians haven't been listening for a long time. They've actually been in their own little bubbles. Why? Because it's so convenient and easy, and it's just an inconvenience. We only need them when it comes down to elections. And I want them to say why they think that we're failing them.
All right, Darren.
Yeah, and I think this is a big challenge, particularly for European politicians, MEPs particularly, because there is still a connection for most voters between them and the local national representatives, but not necessarily between MEPs, but they do represent them. And of course, the European Union itself is running this project not just to get people to turn out to vote, but to try and encourage others to vote too. And this is a chance, I suppose, to actually engage with your elected representatives, to have your says on issues. And, you know, Europe is clearly an angry place at the moment.
And I think it's
for people to kind of vent what's causing that anger. Why are people taking to the streets?
And apart from just the anger, I mean, I think it's an important time because there are a lot of opinions out there that did not make it into a lot of the media, that we don't talk about them, or they're just left to the fringe and then they go out to vote. And I think this is what's important in getting...
And one of the ethos of Euronews is the whole point is that we're meant to represent all views. And again, this is a chance for, not just for us to sit on a sofa pretending we know what all views are, it's for a chance for you guys at home to call in and represent these views.
That's right after the show. We still have one more thing for you. It's time for tonight's Raw Moment, and the US President Donald Trump has found out that he is not very popular in Europe. But does he care? Let's take a look.
When they say I'm not popular in Europe, I shouldn't be popular in Europe. If I was popular in Europe, I wouldn't be doing my job. Because I want Europe to pay. Germany pays 1%. They should be paying 4%. They're paying 1%. They should be paying even more than that. Other countries pay a small percentage of what they should be paying. So, you know, when I say, I'm sorry, folks, you have to pay up, I shouldn't be popular in Europe. They do a poll. I was at 88%, and now I'm at, very low number. In Europe, I don't care about Europe. I'm not elected by Europeans. I'm elected by Americans.
Ryan, he's wearing like a badge of honor, isn't he?
It's raw. This was a raw moment, and he's a raw type of guy. So he's just saying, I guess, what a bunch of other American presidents have thought in the past. But at the end of the day, if he wants to be a world leader and the world policeman, you do have to care about what Europe and other people think.
But also, he clearly just clearly makes up numbers. And second of all, if there's someone who does care about what people think about them, it's Donald Trump, I can tell you that.
Indeed. All right. Again, as we said earlier, we would like to hear your views. Stick around. Tell us what you're talking about. I'm on Twitter at Tessa Ercilia, or follow us at Euronews and use the hashtag #RawPolitics. And stay with us for your call. Have a good evening. Bye for now.